Hey everybody, welcome to Hardstuck Gold, the series where bad League of Legends players talk about good League of Legends players. Today we probably have a pretty decent League of Legends player. We have Kelsey Moser from Evil Geniuses. So want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. I don't know how good I am at League of Legends. I haven't touched that game in years, but I am here and happy to be here. I am currently the competitive and education development lead for Evil Geniuses, which is a title that encompasses a lot of stuff, basically internal and external education on multiple facets. So.
Yeah, I can imagine it's quite a broad title. So what does that necessarily look like on a daily basis over at EG?
Yeah, so basically, right now I'm moving further away from coaching, which I ended up taking care of a lot of coaching. But for me, it was very important for us to do very thorough coach interviews, which I ended up doing a lot towards the end of the year to make sure we had a very, very strong staff, and we built out and built up the staff. So now I do a lot of one-on-ones with coaches, basically talking to them about what they want to achieve, what they want to work on, different career paths that they can have, and then also kind of supervise a lot of the paperwork and the processes that go into the career development plans and make sure that things are linear for the players in terms of, okay, I'm a prodigies player, what steps do I have to take to get to academy? I'm an academy player, what steps do I have to take to get to LCS? And how do we make that transparent and clear and constantly assess and update them on their progress throughout the course of the year?
Do you find it, sometimes difficult working with so many people and, trying to get everyone's career advancing all at once? Does that ever get overwhelming?
I think it's useful to have someone who's kind of sort of staying abreast of everything that's going on and not directly coaching the teams, because I don't know, I'm sure you've heard stories of there being too many coaches that don't know what their jobs are. And so if you have a big staff, it's nice to kind of keep track of what's going on and make sure that people aren't saying contradictory information in the one-on-ones to players from other coaches. I think when you have a coaching staff that's very aligned and very kind of on the same page, that happens less. I don't really think we've had a conflict with that so far. And we've been working together for quite a bit going into this year, just kind of prepping and since almost right since before scouting grounds effectively with the current staff. So going okay so far. Yeah.
Okay, so EG's known for this, talent pipeline that everyone keeps talking about. The whole EGP, EGA, straight into the LCS.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think makes EG's approach to this special versus maybe even a good example like 100 Thieves? They do a pretty similar system. What does EG do that sets them apart?
So uniquely qualified to answer this question
Because you,
since
yeah,
I was
you
also part
literally
of
work there.
the 100 Thieves system. I think the thing that makes EG special is just how integrated the coaching staff is in terms of how open the flow of communication. I would say that I really enjoyed working on 100 Thieves Academy because they put so much trust in me basically to lead my team. And if I wanted feedback from the coaches, I would actively go and get it, right? And from the LCS staff, but otherwise, I would hear from them when they wanted one of my players, right? So that's the nice thing. But it's you have on a day-to-day basis, positional coaches from LCS coming to work with academy players. It's required that if you are an LCS coach, you spend at least an hour a week doing a one-on-one with an academy player. Every 2 weeks with a prodigies player, and then of course academy coaches are required to do one-on-ones with prodigies players. So, and then we also offer opportunities for our prodigies head coach to do some work with the academy. So it's kind of nice to have that much. When you're coaching, coaches are all kind of working across teams.
Mm-hmm.
There isn't this really awkward okay, I am literally one of my favorite stories to tell is 100 Thieves 2019 when there was this week in summer where they kept changing the roster, right? They brought up everyone's on my team spent time in the LCS scrim room, even if they didn't play on stage. So it was throughout the week. And normally, when you look at the map, you talk about the top side of the map and the bottom side of the map. Strangely, for some reason, 100 Thieves LCS under Prolly called it left and right side. So my players all went there and they started saying top and bot, but they came back saying left and right side. So it's oh, okay, this is what we call it, right? It's so just small things like this and end up adding up and do kind of make a difference. But obviously there are much more impactful things, because that was like, oh, okay, that's just what it's called now. But like just kind of learning different things, making sure you're teaching the players the correct stuff, like having a very strictly defined, like an academy player needs to know this, right? A prodigies player needs to know this. And then when they get to LCS, it's like, okay, this is easy. We just kind of work from here, you know? So.
Do you think, is there like opportunities for, I guess, like, if I'm an Evil Geniuses Prodigies player, right, and I'm like, I want to go join in and do some extra stuff with the academy team, is there options to, like, you know, sit in on that, or I guess interact with people more if someone has that drive or has a bit of extra time?
Yeah, we're basically trying to create like more opportunities to interact. I think one thing that works very well on EG is just the fact that like Academy and LCS, obviously, they can talk to each other after scrims. I think last year it was very cool to see like Jizuke would come back from an LCS game and Jojo would ask him about like, oh, okay, I watched your pro view, you know? Those kinds of things I think are cool to see, and creating more opportunities to scrim internally, I think, are also great for that matter. Right now, we have like, because Kaori is not quite in the country yet, like he will be eventually, right? We have opportunities for our prodigies AD carry to scrim and then get direct feedback from Kaori, which she's been very good about. Like that kind of stuff, I think is very valuable. Having 2v2s, 1v1 opportunities, and then kind of clear to find, okay, if you want scrim time, like hit benchmarks, these types of things, and having kind of more opportunities for interaction from that perspective. Yeah.
When you look at some other LCS orgs are doing with their academy and LCS team rosters, obviously not to, you know, bash them in any way, but you look at something like, you know, C9, right? Or you look at, I guess, what TL does, trying to, you know, build a championship roster. Do you have like any thoughts on if there's like anything wrong with those approaches, or do you think that it's just like not the way that you would personally handle it?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of different ways that you can approach something like an academy team. And I think the idea that academy results don't matter, I think is kind of missing the point, because academy shouldn't be about results. And I think we could go a long way in terms of changing the way we talk about academy and the way that the broadcast talks about academy from that perspective, to confront the issue of, you know, this isn't a results driven thing. This is like a development pipeline, which can be the clear identity, because right now it just doesn't have that. It doesn't have the identity, which is why FC9's interpretation is, oh, these are basically just practice partners for LCS and that's what they're good for, then, you know, you can do that. That's fine. I think I have insisted a very long time that there's NA talent. And if you don't have a good developmental pipeline in place, like we just don't have the infrastructure that China does. We don't have the infrastructure that South Korea does. We don't have the infrastructure that a lot of the ERLs have in place. So unless we go about it and start creating it ourselves, we're just not going to have that. So for me, it's like, yeah, you can buy players and skip that, but then they'll come and they'll play against the talent that's available in our solo queue, and they'll just inevitably get worse, right? So unless you're building up the infrastructure from like the challenger level players and the master to challenger players all the way up to the top, you're just going to keep having to recycle players and, you know, have them come here and stagnate some more. So yeah.
So we're talking about the EG talent development pipeline. So you see players like you know, Tomio go from Evil Geniuses Prodigies last year up to Academy, and who knows, maybe the LCS in the future, right? So when you have something like that, does it make your team, Evil Geniuses, more attractive to, I guess, prospective talent?
So something really interesting happened at the end of 2021, which is they announced that Scouting Grounds is not going to happen again, right? So basically, from that perspective, now it's a little bit unclear as to what it takes to get to Academy from amateur. And one thing that's really interesting is that if you weren't in Scouting Grounds, the best way to get picked up by an Academy team was through promotion, like looking at those statistics. So being in an amateur org makes more sense if your goal is to go to Academy to do that. But I think it isn't clear. Like without Scouting Grounds, how do you make it to Academy? So a lot of players are And because the pay available in amateur, even for an LCS org, isn't great, a lot of players are kind of like, okay, maybe the best way to get noticed is results. Maybe the best way to get noticed is proving grounds. And some players have come to this conclusion. I'm not quite sure why, because you had proving grounds winners that didn't get picked up, right? You had the best performing amateur teams that weren't academy teams in proving grounds, just the players just didn't get picked up. So I think it's a little bit, it's just that there isn't a clear answer. And so for me, I think it's not necessarily right now that players are more likely to join, like a Prodigies or a Next. But I think if we continue to show like the consistency of promoting within and developing through our pipeline, then in the future, maybe next year, that will be the case.
So you mentioned there, I guess, a little bit about job security, and I think that's something that is a discussion that needs to be had when it comes to amateur, especially. So when you see teams like Immortals and AOE got announced today, just another, I guess, opportunity for more players to be able to have a solid coaching staff, and not have to worry about hopping from team to team every month, to make barely enough income to get by. Do you think like more of these orgs coming in and partnering and doing all these things is good for the scene overall with that, extra job security?
So I think it's interesting because we overall have fewer orgs having amateur teams now, right? Like fewer LCS orgs partnering with amateur teams than summer.
Yeah, I guess TSM, but that's rumored to come back. And same thing with Dig is rumored to come back, but
and
we'll see
there's
that
like
happens.
there's that flexibility, right?
Yeah.
Because there was definitely like teams that said, if we don't like win as so far as to say like if we don't get sniper, we're not doing it, like that kind of stuff.
I heard that was the case. Yeah, it's crazy.
So I think that there are teams that like kind of went back and forth with the idea of maybe we don't even do an amateur team. So I don't know if that creates like more opportunities for job security. Necessarily optically, because I do think you still have this idea of it isn't really job security because you aren't getting paid like full time, right? You are basically just getting paid for like you're effectively getting paid a part-time salary, and a lot of times like players are doing close to full-time work. I think like the way the Prodigies and the Next and all these programs are designed is in theory is for players who like are not quite sure about the pro lifestyle, but it does attract people who really, really want to go pro. And they are the ones who kind of devote like all their extra free time to doing it. And so right now it's still just not a secure option. I think if anything, it's kind of interesting because now because of the amateur tier existing, Academy is becoming less about rookies, right? So Academy is becoming in a lot of ways less about rookies, and you have to kind of be a little bit more experienced, and amateur is where orgs are taking more risks on inexperienced players, right? So that actually makes it feel like there's even less job security available because if you don't have experience, you're not going to get the full-time salary. So yeah, I don't know. It's a very complicated and nuanced question.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't necessarily think job security is the thing that's being promoted here, but I do think ideally the path to LCS is becoming clearer, right? And I think that that's like more what I would focus on or suggest is the result of this.
Interesting. That's an interesting response because I don't know, at least through an outsider perspective, he doesn't have like the I guess idea on like how all the contracts and all that work. I just kind of assume when the big orgs came in that they would probably be give it a decent sum.
Definitely, yeah. I'm saying like LCS orgs definitely pay more.
Oh,
right?
I know.
Like,
I'm not saying that's not the case. Yeah.
Because I remember when I was doing research for like what we should pay the next players, like when we were developing the next program, and I was basically asking around about the salaries, and it was like, we'll pay about like 100 to 200 if someone has like previous LCS experience. Otherwise, people just weren't getting paid at all, right? And I do think that like more money is trickling in, but there are like negative externalities as a result of that to an extent.
So what do you think when you see like the Team Liquids of the world, not having an amateur team, and do you think that kind of reflects the org and their ambitions and their goals?
So I think there was an interesting point brought up by that because I remember seeing Spawn talk about this. I think it was on Hotline League where he said that he just didn't have the knowledge to scout and bring up an amateur team because he came from Oceania, and I think he said that aspirationally Team Liquid would want something like this, but they didn't have the resources or the kind of knowledge to have the scouting in place to put one together. And I think that's kind of a relatable thing. Like the first thing I did when I came to NA was like, let's just pick up these 4 scouting grass players, you know? Mm-hmm. And I would say that my knowledge of the amateur scene and the players available, the talent there, and the amount of solo queue I watch and everything else is just, it's a lot better now. So obviously, like, scouts in EG, like specifically Empire, etc. Like there's much more knowledge kind of in place there than maybe necessarily like the some of the other orgs. So I think it might speak to where their focus is, but I don't necessarily think it speaks entirely to like they will never have one or they're just not interested, right? I think it's just more that they are more interested in like the top tier results at the moment. And that's not to say that they aren't interested in developing talent. It's not expressing itself currently in the form of a third tier team, right?
So do you think like the removal, because you mentioned a couple times here, of scouting grounds overall, you mentioned how that kind of blurs the path to the LCS and Academy a bit. Do you wish Riot would have kept that, the format? Or, because I mean, this year was a little bit weird. Let's be honest.
Yeah, I think like basically after the first scouting grounds that I saw, which was like the 2018 scouting grounds, or by I saw, I meant as a member of team staff. After that, it was a superfluous exercise in a lot of ways. So it's like, it's nice to work with them, but I would have contacted them. Like if I want to do a one-on-one with a player that I see on solo queue ladder, I'll reach out to them and strike up a conversation with them, talk to them, see how they respond to coaching, see how they respond to feedback, see what their interest is, like where they are in their life, like those types of things. So scouting grounds like that theoretically helped a lot in the beginning because teams weren't actively doing that. But I think I'm actually really happy to say that a lot of teams are doing that now. And so it's just kind of it's become sort of this extra limb that no one really kind of, it's like a tailbone, like we don't use it anymore, you know. In a way it was useful at one point. So I think that's sort of where scouting grounds has gone. And so I just think the problem is that players just don't really see the transparency of what they need to do now, right? Like they aren't quite sure like what their next steps are to make it to the academy level. And I think that as orgs, we can do a lot better job of that. So
would you, be willing to give like an example of what, orgs should do better in that way, or
yeah,
a little bit
I think
ambiguous?
just being more explicit on like what scouting criteria is. Like I have openly said that basically I watch team fights. Like if I'm recruiting for academy and amateur, it's like I just want to see like how you click your buttons, how you react, like how you think in certain situations, and then the rest of the game is teachable. Like I think laning is quite possibly the most teachable aspect of League of Legends. And I think my opinions have slowly changed over time. Like I do think to an extent you could teach team fighting at least conceptually, right? Like you can teach how you're thinking about a fight, what you're going into a fight, thinking about mindsets and repeatable patterns that people can find, and teaching like how to think rather than how to respond to the situation you just played is kind of the key there. But in general, I would say that just like being if orgs are transparent about their criteria and where they look and how they look, and like we watch this amount of solo queue, we watch this amount of proving grounds, and I think to an extent some orgs don't do it just because there's like definitely a difference org to org, like their resource and time investment and how that happens. So I understand why it doesn't happen, but at least being transparent on the criteria you use is a big step forward. Yeah.
Fair enough. So I guess we kind of talked, exhausted the general, academy and amateur topics, but I guess let's talk a little bit about the rosters this year. So for those who don't know about the rosters, so for academy, it's Surdy, Tomio, Soligo, Kaori. Is that how you say it? Is it Kaori?
Kaori.
All right, thank you. And SkyTech. as their support. And then for prodigies, I'm probably going to butcher some of these as well. It's Faisal, Perry, Leo, Sketchstreams, and Dabshit. So let's start with Academy. So the most interesting one is Kaori, or I just said it, but now I forgot how to say it. Him. So he is, for those who aren't aware, he is a TCL ADC. I think he played on, oh God, what was that team? Who did he play for last year? It was, I'm blanking. Yeah, I forget.
He watched the games, and I immediately forget. You know, it's like, okay, we signed cool. I think he played for 2 different teams on a Supermassive one. Was there?
Oh, I think it might have been. It might have been super.
Yeah,
it was Supermassive.
Yeah, it was Supermassive. Yeah, because Supermassive changed the name from Supermassive to Supermassive Blaze. Okay, just looked it up. I'm good.
There we go.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I mean, that's obviously a little bit more of a exotic pickup. So what? Does the process change a little bit when signing a foreign player?
And yeah, for sure. Obviously, like, you have to be concerned with visas. You have to be concerned with all of those things. For me, it's like I almost never think it's worth it to. I don't actively like look for imports a lot, just because it's a lot of times the talent. I think the talent pipeline is really here. So, like, when you say he's the most interesting player, like, I don't necessarily think that's true. But
well, I guess interesting through an outsider perspective, you know.
Sure. He's the player that people would know the least about. Probably. Yes. Is the best way to put it. So I think, like, obviously the process is very different. I wouldn't say that the initial scouting process is that different. We're still looking at games. We're still asking players for POVs. We're still doing all of those things. It's just more like the technical process of getting them to come to know the background, right? Is a bit different. Mm-hmm.
And I this is interesting because I heard that a lot of teams were actually looking at this guy. And I don't know, obviously, a lot, but apparently a bunch of top 5 teams were looking at him besides EG, which is interesting. So what do you think it is about him that brings this level of interest from all these orgs?
And I think he has basically very kind of like aggressive qualities in terms of like how he plays team fights, how he positions, how he wants to play, like, to push limits quite a bit, and he just clicks his buttons well. And also, I think from like the mid and AD perspective, we were looking for like stronger pillars in terms of like experience, but also skill with the game. And I think that's why like Soligo made a lot of sense as well. So from the same perspective.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about Soligo then. So Soligo's interesting because I think a lot of people would agree it was kind of robbed on Dignitas last year, unfortunately. So at least he has another chance here on the Academy roster. What is it that you're looking to get out of him as a player? Is he like going to be like the big leader, shot caller for this team, or is it just that he's a really damn good mid laner who really probably didn't get the chance he deserved?
And it is quite a good mid laner. Obviously, I'm one of the biggest Soligo fans. I've worked with him quite a bit, and I think like he plays fights extremely well. He has like an idea of different like win conditions for how to play out the game, and he's used to playing with. At this point, he's played with Kedvi, he's played with Will, he's played with like all of these kind of like aggressive kind of developing jugglers. So he has like very good patience for someone like Tomio, who is learning and likes to go for a lot of different things. So I think that's like something that's great. So I think he ticks a lot of different boxes, right? Like experience, skilled, an option who like someone who should be an LCS, right? But like we like luckily for us, we get him on Academy, right? So I think all of those things were just like we were kind of lucky that he ended up being available, right? Mm-hmm.
So yeah, Tomio's also interesting because he was promoted from Prodigies in the summer of last year. Probably, I assume, to extend his contract. Probably the main reason. Also, he's just really good. Mm-hmm. But also, Surdy got promoted as well. So you have 3 Prodigy players on your team from last year. So I guess what is it about these 3 that made them stand out and the reason why they were promoted?
Yeah, so I think it's just like for the other 3 roles, it was like we are looking for just kind of a combination of mechanical skill and like ability to retain information, respond to coaching, and just like kind of the ability to function together in a team and to complement each other, right, as solid pieces. And I think Surdy is someone who improved a ridiculous amount over the course of his time on Prodigies, and right now just like seeing his trajectory is really, really satisfying, because it means that the coaching that he received was effective, but also means that like he's a very driven player. Like he has a mind that actually he self-coaches very well. Like usually one of the biggest jobs of a coach is to teach players how to break things down in a framework, right? But he already naturally does that, which is very rare. Like he kind of has coach brain as a player, while also being skilled, right? So I think for him, it's just like for a lot of really skilled players, it's like impulse control, experience, those types of things will be things that they'll work on in academy more, in addition to expanding their game knowledge and expanding their frameworks that exist. But he naturally has the tendency to do that, which I think will help him learn extremely fast. Tomio is just mechanically good. I think he's working a lot on his game knowledge and his judgment, but he just like plays fights extremely well, right? And then I think Skytech similarly, right? I think Skytech and Tomio are really, really like at their core, like development pieces, who are almost coming in as blank slates, and we have a very good kind of strong coaching staff, I think, that will help them catch up and help the team grow and develop together.
So a little bit of a more or less a question. So Tony Top, right? I think he's a player that a lot of people were pretty bullish on, right? So obviously Surdy got the spot this year. What is it? I think it's probably more of a play style thing, right? But what is it that made you guys decide to go with Surdy over Tony Top? And obviously not to bash Tony Top. He's a great guy, it seems. But
yeah, and I think they were both great. I was lucky to be able to work with both of them last year. It's just in terms of like what we evaluated, what we needed, this is going to be the biggest answer I give.
All right, fair enough.
Surdy fit better, right? It was basically that simple. So yeah.
And one kind of, I guess, top lane related question, but this is about the main roster, and it's kind of random, but I'm just thinking about it. Is Impact last year do the military service? Is this it? Or is that not confirmed? Or you don't know? All right.
I'm not confirming.
All right.
Either way. So.
Fair enough. All right. I had to ask because I think that's something that a lot of people.
It's an obligation in a way. It's like you're not going to get a straight answer, but you got to ask anyway.
Yeah, so, it's a duty. Civic duty. But no, honestly, I think this academy roster, in terms of, at least in my opinion, what EG is trying to do and trying to complement parts of their main roster, is really, really good. And I was really happy with all the signings there. And I probably, if I did a academy, like in terms of what I think this team is needing, like tier list, and I thought like this was the best one, and I'm not saying that just to stroke your ego, but I genuinely think it's great.
You had me here, so you may as well.
Yeah,
so, right. And obviously I can't take credit for all of it.
No, of course, yeah, but
like Empire does great work, like very good talent identification, for sure, and great to work with a lot of people at EG who have like very good vision and very good understanding of kind of what they want from a team. So it's great.
So I guess let's move on to Prodigies. So Prodigies is mostly a bunch of AoE players, and then Dabshit.
Yeah.
So I guess let's start with Dabshit first. Obviously coming off a great year with Wildcard, with probably the best bot laner anyone could ask for in amateur Arrow. So what is it about Dabshit that made him stand out as sort of like the more, he's not really truly a veteran. He's not like, been playing for a long time, right. But, as the more veteran player on this team.
Yeah, and I think he's, like he has a lot of things that he wants to do. His understanding of like, he's very fearless when it comes to dives. Play situations pretty well. I think that we had an opportunity there was a lot of kind of back and forth in terms of like, should we go for veterans? Should we go for, I think one thing that's interesting about this team is everyone talks, right? Everyone has an opinion. Everyone has an idea of how to make a plan and what to execute. And so even though there isn't a veteran presence, there's a lot of opinions and a lot of individuals who kind of have vision for where they want to go and want to take the responsibility of leadership. So it kind of helps them out. And the fact that we have a coaching staff that can really kind of reach the prodigies at multiple levels and help them out I think is going to be very important for these guys because they're very green. But I think it's like they have a good foundation to work from. So that's the most exciting thing about this team.
Yeah, because when I was looking at stalking their Leaguepedias, it seems like the majority of these players started playing professionally, or I guess semi-professionally, in 2021. So most of these, guys have not even played professionally for a year, which is pretty impressive, and a lot of talent potential here. Something that the one that I've heard the most about is Leo, and I want to like learn a little bit more about him because I'm not too familiar with him. I didn't watch a lot of the AOE games, so I'll be perfectly blunt because they have 20 trillion teams. But can you mind telling me a little bit about him?
Yeah, I think Leo is someone who right now doesn't have the most robust champion pool, but shows a lot of talent on the champions that he's most known for. So like Jace is going to be one that he's really well known for, and so he'll definitely like he pop off on a lot of like particular picks, and that's something that you look for in a particularly green player is just do they have the hands to execute when they know what they're doing, right? And then the rest of it, I think, will be coachable, and I expect him, like I'm saying this, but I think even by next week, like champion pool shouldn't be an issue. So he's in good hands and will learn quickly. So yeah.
Well, something interesting about him is that he role swaps the top a bit in some of his games.
Yeah, he does have some qualities of a top laner, I will say. So it's a good because he definitely has like that. He gravitates more towards those bruisers, right? So I think he has that flexibility, and that's something that because Faisal is also a very talented player. So I think that's something that we'll be able to utilize to an extent.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure he could probably pull out some nutty picks in the mid lane that most people probably would not expect. All right, I guess Perry's another interesting one because he came from Scouting Grounds as well. And he won Scouting Grounds along with Dabshit, correct? They got first place, I think.
I don't remember who won Scouting Grounds. Like it's terrible because it's like when it comes to like academy and amateur, I don't care who wins. I care who looks good and who I want, who improves and who I want to coach. So it's
fair enough.
I'm very like anti-results when it comes to those leagues, and I'm very much more about the individual players in them. So yeah, so I don't remember if he won Scouting Grounds or not, but he definitely has like a good knack for planning. Very vocal, understands a lot about pathing for someone his age and of his experience level, and is very exciting to work with. So yeah.
And for those who are not aware, I think Perry's 17, correct? I think.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, which is awesome. And finally, I guess the last one here is Sketch Streams. I know absolutely nothing, so.
Yeah, I would say that of all the players, he's probably the one with the best kind of like most methodical way of approaching the game in terms of like, okay, guys, we're gonna do this reset. Let's go. This X, Y, and Z. Very forward thinking in terms of that. So I think he brings a lot of that quality, and he's very kind of demanding of himself, and very hard worker. I think he has a lot of like he'll go far very quickly. He'll learn fast. So he's someone that I'm excited to have within our system for sure, and he'll always kind of tell you like it is, which is definitely a quality that people will appreciate as well. So
sort of just a random question here about like the whole, I guess, talent thing. So what do you think, like overall as a role in North America, like is probably the weakest? Like in terms of, like there's probably not a ton of young talent, or not, like, you know what I mean? But like there's probably not as developed the players.
I mean, I think support.
I would agree. All right.
It's not a sexy role. People don't like it. It doesn't attract the kids who can click the buttons the fastest, right? So I think we're fortunate to have like good NA support players within our system, but not every team is. So
fair enough. It seems to also be the role in that like people just stick around the longest too, not to be mean to anyone, but
again, it's like lower. I think the problem with excelling as a support is it generally requires experience, because to be a good support player, you kind of have to have a wherewithal to understand what's going on the map and use the fact that your champions aren't hard. as hard, I should say, because I'm not going to say they're not hard.
Yeah.
Your champions aren't as hard, and you don't have to focus on CSing or farming or anything like that. So you have theoretically the best bird's eye view, and the players who can take advantage of that the most are the ones who will look the best. Which is why, like, the experienced players are the ones that tend to shine the most as support in terms of like that correlation and trajectory. So it's hard to make it as a rookie support because the criteria which a lot of supports are judged are much more contextual and experience based and way less mechanical. And it's hard to kind of get supports to be creative and to see the map as kind of like you almost have to see the matrix while you're looking at the map, you know, like see outside the pixels, you know, in a certain way and see the play like coming out before you and making that decision like several steps ahead. So
do you think like part of the issue as well is that it kind of is it because it's a duo lane, it's dependent on how good your ADC is, at least in the laning phase, that, you know, if you don't have a great duo, it probably won't make you look as good as you possibly could be?
I think that's true, but I wouldn't necessarily say that that's why support is the role that struggles the most in an A. But I would just say that it's like, obviously that's true of any role. Like you can argue that, like, I mean, mid laners love to say mid is support diff, and I would say that that's definitely true in LPL, for example.
Yeah, I mean, that league's crazy.
So it's like you can make that argument in a lot of cases. So I don't necessarily go for that. I think it's good talent scouts and good coaches and good commentators can tell the difference between like a good player and a player who's kind of getting carried, right? So.
You just mentioned the LPL, and you had a pretty big announcement on Twitter today about the LPL co-stream. Pretty exciting. Obviously, you're known for watching a ton of the LPL. What is it about like that region that just makes it so much fun to watch for you?
It's just they just go for everything, you know. Like they try so many different things and make it stick, and everything's exciting to watch. Like I recently did a concept piece that'll come out in a bit, but it's like there were so many supports that I mentioned that it's just like every fight's a good fight. They'll just take the fight every time, all the time. You know, it's like, and it's fun to watch. It's not always what you want representing the region that you root for at Worlds.
True.
I'm just going to be honest about that because it's very coin flip, but it's so fun to watch. So you can't deny that.
Is it? I assume the LPL is your favorite region to watch, right?
Yeah, it's my favorite region to watch, and of course, it's like, you know, there's the cross section of NA Academy enjoyers and LPL enjoyers, and that's like the perfect, you know, the perfect cross section, of course, because they have so much in common.
Oh yeah, insanely high level of play, right? Yeah.
Oh yes.
No, but that's exciting though. Honestly, it's interesting because I think the LPL's been really making a push to get it out to the Western audiences more in like the past year. Do you think that's something that like the LPL and their teams are struggling with a bit, getting a little bit of that Western outreach?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's like necessarily a priority for them because there is so much fan engagement and like their leagues are doing very well domestically just in terms of like they have all these merchandising lines. They have like really big title sponsors. It's just kind of more of a global awareness. I think there's always that sense of you want more people to talk about things that you're proud of, and I think that's kind of also why they're open to having like co-streamers and just kind of projecting that and having like sponsored content that go on I Will Dominate's channel, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like that will give them a bigger audience, and it's not about the numbers and the metrics and the viewer ad revenue that goes back to them. It's more about like the global awareness of the league that I think is something that they really care about. So yeah.
I mean, well, that makes sense. That does. Like one of the things that this is gonna sound really dumb, but one of the things that annoys me like the most about like the LPL is that I can't order a jersey for 99% of their teams. Like I would have loved to get an FPX jersey. Like I like, but there's no English site. There was no like, all right, well I could fill this out and translate it.
A friend with a Chinese bank account usually.
Yeah,
so.
it's crazy. And it's like it's stuff like that, at least to me, that I guess turns me off a bit from watching the LPL because I'm more of an LCK person. Honestly, I love the LCK.
There you go.
Unfortunately, my Afrika got destroyed, and now they're the Guangdong or whatever freaks. Very sad. But like it's just something that kind of is weird to me, and I kind of wish they would do a better job at. But that was a really random tangent. But I just thought I'd throw that out there.
Yeah, good stuff.
There we go. So I guess this kind of relates to the LPL. Do you think there's like an overload on really good League of Legends content to watch right now? Because there's like, not even really good, but like leagues, because you have all the ERLs, you have the LEC, you have the LCS, you have LCS Academy, you have Amateur, you have the LCK Challenger Series, LCK, all the other trillion leagues. Do you think there's too much?
But I also think it doesn't matter, right? Like, I think it's everyone will have something that appeals to them, right, and resonates in some way. So I don't necessarily think that that's like an overload is a problem. It's just like pick what you want to watch, you know. It's kind of it. That works. Like it's down to the leagues and the broadcasters to make a good case for why you should watch them instead of everything else that's going on. And some leagues do a really good job. Like LEC does an excellent job, right? And they transformed their identity and built their brand from where it was struggling. So I think that's something that a lot of different leagues can take notes from.
When that comes to Academy and Amateur, do you think there's like issues with the broadcast that kind of leads to some of the lower viewership numbers and kind of the meme that no one watches Academy?
So yeah, I'm gonna avoid talking about that because I know there's stuff coming down the pipeline, and so maybe we'll have a conversation about that in the future. But I think Academy will be different. I think in this year. That's what I'll say for now.
Oh, spicy! I have no idea what you're talking about. Actually, that's interesting. All right. Well, honestly, that's kind of everything that I really wanted to talk about. Actually, no, one final thing. The NA Super Server. All right.
Oh,
this is
okay,
you had some hot takes on this on Twitter, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and you got some trash for that, I'm sure. But when it comes down to the Super Server, what is your main, I guess, not really issue, but gripe with it? For those who aren't aware.
So I guess one of the biggest reasons why people don't do the in-houses is because the queue times of the in-houses are so long, just because there are so few people who are going to use it, right? And theoretically, it's like, okay, you're still going to be playing with the same people, like when you're done with scrims, and theoretically, there's an hour where everyone will be looking for games, so you should be able to get a game, but not every player. Like I know players who think that they don't want to show things, right, within like those types of atmospheres. But if you're talking about me personally, so I just don't think it'll be that used. Like, if I'm completely honest, is I think it won't be as used because the queue times will be longer than the regular server, all these other factors. But I do, and it's not because, LCS players are lazy. It's just, it's not a perfect solution. And then also from my perspective, it's like short run. It might make the individual players, individual LCS players on the super server stronger. Like, let's say in a perfect world, everyone uses it and it's wildly successful, which I'm not going to discount, right?
Yeah.
But it's not long run. You're cutting out so many of your player base from the highest quality games possible, which, and you could say, yeah, but if you're high elo, right, on regular server, you get invited to the super server. But there's not really a measure in place to identify those players if you're playing on the super server, for example. And then also, a lot of those players are on East Coast or in Toronto with pings that are like over 120. And I don't think for them it's even worth to play on the super server at that point. Like, at that point, you have to kind of guess, like, there's a cutoff for how much I'm going to get from this. Like, that's when you almost start asking, like, is it better for me to play on EU West even, right?
Yeah,
like,
I mean,
at that point.
Unironically, some would argue that. And I think it's one of the most interesting parts about it is that you see, like, well, so, Tyler one's in Missouri, right? He's a challenger player. Like, he's good, and it's that's just obviously a meme example, but it's like, well, what about the universities? What about Maryville? What about Harrisburg? What about all these schools that aren't going to be able to, or if they do, on pretty awful ping, which I think was the issue that the server was trying to fix. So I don't know. I worry about like the, I guess, gatekeeping in a sense of it, and the economic implications of, well, someone, if they really want the best practice, is going to have to move to California and then, pay twice as much cost of living.
And it's, I don't even know what form this will take, right?
Yeah.
Like they said, there will be more details, so there's no guarantee that it's just going to be you push a button and you queue up anyway, right? So it's really difficult to say how exactly it's going to work logistically before we can make a lot of comments on what it'll look like
Hmm.
what the approval process is to be involved. But right now, like my immediate feeling is like it's bad for the long term development of the talent pipeline, and it'll give you some short term benefits, but I don't even know how much engagement there will be on it in the first place. So yeah.
Random conspiracy theory that I thought of, right?
Okay.
Do you think that they made this as a possibility because of NA Worlds this year, and they want good ping for the people that are boot camping?
I mean, that's like a possible thought, right? That will rise up and that will be a thing. But you know, I'm not discounting it. I don't even think it's that far fetched as a conspiracy. So,
All right, all right. I just want to know I'm not crazy. All right, thank
yeah.
you, thank you.
All right, good.
All right, well that's all I got.
Right.
Honestly, thank you
Thanks.
for coming on. I've had fun. It's interesting hearing the inside perspective, as you're like, it feels like at least you're one of the unofficial ambassadors of amateur and academy. You know, so it's always interesting hearing your perspective on all the shows. So I appreciate you for coming on, and I guess go evil geniuses, right?
All right, yeah, of course. Thank you. And just point to your flag. It's great. Okay. All right.